We all know the quiet voice that sometimes rises in moments of hardship. It feels as if I'm cursed. Perhaps I deserve this. How much more punishment can I take? Discomfort, difficulty, even deep suffering are part of the fabric of everyday life. But it's striking how often we explain our misfortune as something earned, some fault in ourselves that warrants retribution. Psychologists suggest that human beings have a powerful need to see the world as fair, and so we slip into the belief that if something has gone wrong, someone, often ourselves, must somehow pay for it. Even outside religious frameworks, many people hold to an idea of the universe as morally ordered and automatically punishing wrongdoing and rewarding virtue, and the consequences can be painful. Survivors of trauma frequently interpret terrible events as personal punishment, and clinical research shows that believing one deserves suffering does deepen shame. It does fuel depression, and it intensifies a feeling of hopelessness. One common depressed conviction is, I'm bad and so deserve bad things. And this can shape a whole inner universe of despair. There is a long history of attributing misfortune to the will of God. This is so even when the causes appear to be human. In explicitly religious settings, this belief may take a particular form. A sense of being punished by God is associated with anxiety, with guilt, and with suicidal thoughts, especially when the religious culture is authoritarian, emphasizing strict moral judgment and divine retribution. For example, a crane collapsed in Mecca's Grand Mosque in 2015, killing over 100 pilgrims. Afterwards, a senior cleric described the tragedy as the will of Allah. Now, many of us, believers and non-believers alike, wrestle with the question, how could the suffering of innocents be the intention of a loving God? Yet, interpreting adversity as punishment is not the only interpretation. Some of us view suffering not as punishment for human failings, but as the byproduct of our errors and folly, thus the consequences of human decisions. So for us, suffering is neither a punishment nor the fault of any one person necessarily, but the outcome of complex circumstances. The theologian Emanuel Swedenborg, writing in the 18th century, also challenged the idea of divine punishment. God, he argued, never inflicts suffering. Love cannot act that way. What we experience as suffering is born not of divine anger. Instead, he said, it comes from human choices, our ignorance, our carelessness, our self-centeredness. Actually, these days, studies show that greater hope, optimism and well-being is linked with seeing God, or the universe, as ultimately benevolent. But believing oneself punished by God, or the universe, creates us distress. Seeing suffering as a test or a chance to grow predicts resilience. And for Swedenborg, suffering can still have meaning, but as a source of learning rather than retribution. Pain, he believed, can stir us from complacency and selfishness. Mistakes can become teachers. It's a distinction echoed across cultures, that suffering may serve a purpose without being a punishment. Angelina Jolie once remarked, "Without suffering, we would never learn from our mistakes." Now consider for a moment 3 well-known lives. First of all, Winston Churchill. He was hampered by a lisp. He never fully overcame that. He turned it into a part of his unmistakable style. Far more debilitating for him were his bouts of severe depression, his black dog, as he called it. Raised with little affection as a child, Winston later endured lifelong inner storms. Yet some have wondered whether this suffering gave him a clearer grasp of danger and a deeper capacity to inspire courage in others. "We shall draw from the heart of suffering itself," Churchill said, "the means of inspiration and survival." Second person I'd like to mention, Helen Keller. Deaf and blind by the age of 19 months, she seemed destined for a life cut from the world. Instead, with the help of her teacher, Annie Sullivan, she became a humanitarian and activist. A hidden love affair was later thwarted by her overprotective family, but it remained, she said, a little island of joy surrounded by dark waters. Reflecting on her struggles, she wrote, "Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened." And then, thirdly, Khalil Gibran, the poet and mystic. His father was harsh and unpredictable, his early life marked by exile and poverty. At 19, he lost his mother, he lost his sister and his half-brother to TB. And later, the woman he loved declined to marry him. Yet, from these wounds came a philosophy in which suffering shapes the strongest souls. The most massive characters, he wrote, are seared with scars. These stories echo a broader truth. Hardship can sometimes forge resilience. It can forge wisdom and compassion. It can transform limitations into strengths, if we let it. Our inner battles, they can be depression, they can be disability or grief, whatever they are. They can become sources of determination, of insight and service to others. For Emanuel Swedenborg, this is part of a wider idea, the notion of divine permission. According to this view, God, like a loving parent, does not cause suffering, but allows human freedom to operate, even when that freedom leads to our mistakes, sometimes terrible mistakes, and the consequences they produce. We reap what we sow, but in doing so, we are offered the chance to learn. The challenge is to discern the lesson without imagining that we are being judged or condemned. That's the challenge. In summary then, in this video, I've explored how suffering can deepen empathy, spark creativity, and nurture inner strength. But suffering is not, in my view, God's punishment. Growth arises not from blame, least of all self-blame, but from learning, from humility, and from the refusal to let pain have the last word. Thanks for watching. If you've been interested, why not give me a like and offer a comment? It does very much encourage YouTube to show this video to a wider audience. And you may also want to click the link to Life is Not a Waste.